It's time to make a rich, creamy, foaming men's solid shave bar. Now you may have seen dual lye and cream soaps floating around out there, but did you know that you can take those shave cream formulas and apply them to a solid bar of soap? In today's episode of Thermal Mermaid, we'll make a basil and spice men's solid shave bar. Now the recipe of a shave soap has a certain type of formula to get it to lather the way we want it to. This formula can have a window of options because different people like different qualities in their shave soaps. There are primarily two types of people out there: those who like a slick, slippery, almost slimy texture, and those who like a foaming lather. So not all shave textures will be the same, and that's why you'll see that these are made with swinging variations. This recipe is made with entirely hard oils, so I'll get these melted down and combined and set them aside with our lye water solution to cool. Now there are going to be some differences in this recipe that you see today that you don't normally see in your cold process recipes, so stay tuned for some surprises where you can watch how the nuance of a recipe changes the way that you work. Here, I'm going to prepare a little goat's milk before the action starts. This is 2 tablespoons, and I'm just going to blend it down in an ounce of water. Milk will diminish inflammation and soothe the skin. It'll also contribute to the creamy texture of the lather, so this is a bonus for facial soaps. The bar we're making today will have a rich foaming lather with small creamy bubbles. It'll have a silk-like texture to the foam, and it'll look like cappuccino froth. This is a contrast to our Shave Slick bar, which had more of a clear, viscous lather with more slippage. You can see the difference in that formula in the video in the card above. In the bowl to the left, we have our melted hard oils, and in the bowl you see here, I have almost 5 ounces of stearic acid. Now this is going to do 2 things. Well, actually, it's going to do a lot, but the attributes that it'll contribute to the soap are that it'll make the bar harder and it'll increase the lather. In a shave soap, stearic acid is used to get a boost in the lather. Now this is a little finicky because it needs to be melted down, but it solidifies at a much hotter temperature than the rest of the oils. So I have to get this melted and ready to pour at the same time we make the soap batter. When I add the stearic acid into my oils, I'm working at a warmer temperature than I would normally, and I'm mixing at the same time to get the oils to break each other apart and keep everything liquid. If you try to pour stearic acid into a liquid that's cool and you don't mix it, it can turn right back into the little pieces of its solid form, and then it never really becomes part of the mixture. So you have to watch it blend together and make sure that you keep mixing the whole time. Now here's where our party starts. I'm going to pour the lye solution into the oils and the stearic acid and watch this trace almost instantly. This, fellow soapers, is a false trace. In fact, it isn't even a trace at all. What you're seeing is the hard oils and the stearic acid solidifying back into the solid state that it wants to be in and how those oils first started out. When you work with stearic acid and a little less so the hard oils in a cold process soap, you actually work at a warmer temperature to keep this under control. Instead of working at our typical room temperature, we're working at close to 130 degrees. And this keeps us in a state of oils that will remain liquid so we can get them all incorporated and mixed together. Now, if you were to think that you reached trace super fast and you started to panic to get this soap transferred as soon as possible, you'd end up missing out on the very important time that it takes to get emulsification. And the next day, you would have a mold filled with swampy goop that's separated with the liquid on top and the heavier oils on the bottom. So you can see here, I'm not really hurrying too much. This isn't really seizing like it looks like it is. In fact, once I put in my additives, which are the goat's milk, the fragrance oils, and the glycerin, you can see that it starts to loosen up a little bit. The texture is thick, so it's important that I take my time to make sure that those things are completely incorporated. The only thing that really changes when you have a false trace that you're also expecting is that it takes away some of the signals that you normally look for. So for example, while I'm trudging through this, I can't really see the emulsification happen. So I have to just make sure that I'm working through all the batter with the hand mixer on the upper levels and down below. A false trace is more of a problem when you're working with a recipe and you aren't expecting it to happen, or if you're working with additives that you don't normally use so you aren't sure. And you have to make a judgment call as to where you get that soap transferred. Now, stearic acid is well known to create a false trace, so that was no surprise. But one way you would know is that I barely mixed anything before the oils reacted. This means that the additive that instigated it, in this case it was the lye, it didn't even have time to touch the oils. Those oils were reacting to the temperature change in each other, and that's what started solidifying instantly. A real fast trace usually occurs after there's been some mixing, and mostly when the fragrance oils are introduced. Now, just because a false trace happened quickly doesn't mean that a real trace isn't far behind. Remember, this recipe is entirely hard oils, so we still need to expect them to be heavy and fast. Now for the design in this bar, this is a men's soap and it smells like a men's soap. It has a nice outdoor organic fresh bagel and sage scent with a little bite to it. And I want the color scheme to match the scent, so I'm going to separate this into 3 parts, color 1 part white and 2 green. 1 part will get a tablespoon of basil powder, and the other will get a teaspoon of soapberry green. This is my favorite green plant color mica. It still gives it a pop of color without ending up looking too organic and drab. I'm going to mix these colors in well. The smell of the basil powder is incredible and it reminds me of pesto. Now in cold processed soap, the fragrances in powders and extracts, they don't usually make it through the saponification process, and this one should be no different. But the fragrances that I'm using in this recipe are 1 part sage and citrus and 1 part peppermint. And when I look at that beautiful speckled organic basil color, for some reason, I think it's tricking my brain into thinking that I can smell that basil, because when these bars are cured, I swear they smell like a spiced basil food. Now by this time, we've come to a thick trace, and I can tell because the texture has changed. Before, I was working with fluffy, swollen particles, and now it's moved into a sour cream texture, so it's time to make sure that we get this put into the mold. Now I want this to look a little organic. I won't exactly be getting swirls out of this texture. You should probably never expect that if you have a recipe with entirely hard oils, but I also don't want that crisp camo look, so I'm going to make sure to give it plenty of spoon swirl and toss it around a lot as I'm alternating the colors into the mold. This shave bar is using a formula that you would typically see in a soft shave soap. So since it's all really just soap, what does that mean? Well, you can use this as a body shower soap, but once you put a little effort into the lather, it's going to turn essentially into a shaving cream all over your body. The texture that you're going to get out of this bar is exactly the same lather you would get with a can of shaving cream, so keep that in mind when you make this recipe. Now, if you have any questions while you're working through, you're welcome to come over to our Facebook group and post your creations and your questions. That's an open invite for anybody. You can be a soaper, you can be new, you can be just a lurker if you want. And you can get into that group in the links down below. If you're new, I post a lot of free beginner recipes, so there's tons of content that'll keep you busy for a while if you're interested in starting your own soap projects. Now, because of the way we formulated the recipe, this bar is ready to be cut after only 12 hours. And you can see how hard and solid it is as I'm cutting it. And when we take a peek inside, you can get a view of just how pretty and natural this looks. It's also making me hungry. It has a really energetic smell to it. The peppermint and citrus together give it that crisp, fresh bite, but the sage and the basil give it that comfort smell. It's really super nice. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Thermal Mermaid with our Basil and Spice Men's Solid Shave Bar. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see more of these videos just like this one, make sure that you subscribe. I'll be setting some of these videos on the premiere feature so that I can watch it along with you, and then that way, if you have any questions about what it is that I'm doing, we can talk about that in live time. So if you're new, or if you're just a curious soaper, feel free to reach out and ask anything that you like. You'll have to hit the notifications in order to be notified when we start a premiere. Now, let's get a glimpse of how this shave bar lathers. It takes about 20 seconds, and soon I have a creamy coverage that slips and sticks to my skin. The bubbles don't fall away like a normal soap, and if I keep lathering, the foam will just keep building up. The end result is a layer of rich cream. Thanks for joining me, and come on back tomorrow where we'll have a new project on the horizon.